Very nice. All right, let's hit the last group we're going to talk about today real quick. The tight ends. We won't get real in depth with these guys because the first three groups that we talked about are definitely more important fantasy value wise, but they are definitely worth talking about. So we'll start with your number one tight end on the year, which I'm sure is everybody's number one tight end, which is
It's got to be Travis Kelsey.
absolutely.
Until we see otherwise, Travis Kelsey is going to be the number one tight end in fantasy. He's got some competition coming behind him. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Kyle Pitts, but for all intents and purposes, Travis Kelsey's still the best tight end in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot disagree there. He is actually being taken in the first round generally. I personally wouldn't reach for him in the first. I might consider it in the second because his fantasy production is up there with the best of them overall. But yeah, Travis Kelsey, number one, hands down. Who do you have number two?
Number two for me is going to be George Kittle. And this is a guy I took a big chance on George Kittle, drafted him in multiple money leagues last year, and it did not go well for me because he was injured for a lot of it. But assuming he can stay healthy, I feel like if the Niners didn't run the ball so goddamn much, George Kittle could easily be the best tight end in the league. We could be talking about him being number one all the time, but um, because of because they run the ball like 40 times a game, George Kittle is going to be my number two. I wish I could put him one, but he's going to be my number two.
Yeah, I have Kittle at number three. I have the guy you have at number four is my number two, which we'll get to. But yeah, Kittle at number three, I think he'll definitely produce. He is going in the early third round, about 26th overall. I don't know if I would risk it on a tight end like that, but like I said, with Kelsey, the production value is still up there with those kind of guys around that draft area. So it's definitely something to consider. Uh, but yeah, who's your number three?
Number three is going to be the freaking nature that the Falcons drafted this year, Kyle Pitts. And obviously we don't know how we're going to use him. I'm assuming that they're going to want to put him in the slot at some point. But I don't know much about the Falcons receivers behind Calvin Ridley. I know Russell Gage has done a little bit, but I just think, okay, well, first of all, the tight end market when it comes to fantasy football is very slim. Okay, so it doesn't take much to climb up the ladder a bit. But because of the usage that we all expect Kyle Pitts to get, I think he had to be number three, and it was hard for me to put him there. There's the guy you have at number two. I wanted to put higher, but Kyle Pitts again, a freak of nature, and I expect him to be heavily used this year.
Yeah, I definitely think he's going to get the production. He's essentially replacing Julio Jones, which if you're coming in replacing Julio Jones, you've got to be worth something there. He's currently trending in the fourth round. I have him projected as being a sixth round pick, but his production could be up there. You don't know. Like I said, I tend to personally shy away from rookies, but we'll see. I definitely think he'll be a superstar in the league over the next few years and definitely compete with Kelsey and Kittle up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, moving on to your number four, which is
Waller the baller.
Waller the Baller, baby.
Yes, sir. Somebody who he just a couple days ago, actually, a couple days before we're recording this, he went out and said on Twitter that he's been 4 years sober. So congratulations for Darren Waller, doing his thing, and he's making the most of his second chance. John Gruden has fallen in love with this guy, Derek Carr, loves throwing him the ball, and as a fan, I love watching it. He's a beast. He's got everything you would want in a tight end. He's got the size, he's got the hands, he can move well. He's a lot like Travis Kelsey. If you put the tape on of them right next to each other, they look a lot alike when they're playing. So Darren Waller, by all means, one of the best tight ends in the league over the last couple seasons, and should stay up there.
I agree. He is trending in the third round. I have him being valued as a third round pick. Personally, I wouldn't go for a tight end in the third. Like I said, I'd let him slip a little bit further. But if you do consider him in the third, you should get the production out of him there.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good place to be taking Waller.
All right, number 5 on your list.
Number 5 might be a big surprise to people, but I think he's going to get a lot of usage this year. It's Mr. T.J. Hawkinson. People been waiting to see what this guy can do, and now that there are no receivers in Detroit anymore, Jared Goff has T.J. Hawkinson to throw the ball to. So, that's really the only reason I have him here. It's kind of slim pickings, but I think he's going to get a lot of usage this year, especially because his head coach is a former tight end in the NFL. So I would imagine TJ Hawkinson has a big year for them.
Yeah, I could see it. I like Hawk. He's trending in the 5th round. I have him as more of an 8th round value type player. After your Kelsey, Kittle, Pitts, and Waller, I think there's a drop off in tight end production. But you're right. Goff may turn to Hawkinson because he doesn't really have a whole lot there receiving wise. They have pretty good backs there in Detroit. But receiving wise, there's not a whole lot there. So Hawkinson might get the bulk of the targets in that offense. But like I said, he's trending in the 5th. I don't know if I would reach that high up for him. You know how it goes in drafts. Once somebody takes a tight end, the dominoes start falling. Everybody's got to take a tight end, which I would assume would be the cause of him being drafted so high. But my value for him in a 12-man draft is about the 8th round.
Yeah, that would be about right. Hawkinson's not somebody that I would reach for at all.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So your number 6 tight end on the board is Mark Andrews.
Mark Andrews, yeah, he's a guy that is consistent. He doesn't he'll have some games, kind of like a lot of the tight ends that we're going to name here. There're going to be some games where he has maybe 7 catches and 110 yards and 2 touchdowns, but there's not going to be a lot of that, especially in a running offense. But he's consistent enough to be a relevant tight end that you need to have in fantasy, somebody that's going to get you some points. He's going to get a couple catches a game. So as long as you get somebody that's getting you close to 10 points or maybe in between that 8 and 12 range, so that he's not absolutely killing you every week, I think Mark Andrews is a safe bet.
Yeah, I like Mark Andrews. I definitely think he produces fantasy wise. He's trending in the 4th round. I think it's a little bit of a stretch and a reach for him there. I have him more of a 7th round type player, but he's a big guy. Lamar Jackson likes Mark Andrews. He'll get his targets, he'll get his receptions, he'll get his points. I do like Mark Andrews there. Yeah, I'd probably say he's about the 5th, 6th best tight end. So I can agree with you there.
Yeah, and the 7th round seems pretty appropriate for him. No earlier than that.
Yeah. All right. So number 7 is so
Yeah, I have Gronk. Gronk looked like himself toward the end of last season. We've heard a lot about Tom getting more comfortable in the offense as the year went on, and I think the same thing happened for Gronk. And while OJ Howard is coming back, I just don't think that's going to be a factor. Tom has worked with Gronk for a long time, and again, I don't think he'll have a huge season by any means. But I think for what we look at with tight ends, I think Gronk has the ability to be a top 10 tight end this year.
yeah, I agree with you. I would definitely say top 10. I have him a little bit further down than 7th overall. Right now, he's trending in the 11th round. I have him more valued as a 13th, 14th round type guy. I think there's some other names out there that you could take in ahead of him. But production wise, it wouldn't surprise me if Gronk bounces back to form, especially this being year 2 with this offense. Everybody's back on offense, and they just won the Super Bowl. So that connection with Brady might just be sparked once again, and Gronk could dominate and put up huge numbers. He is considered probably the greatest tight end of all time, arguably. So I could see it, absolutely. But like I said, I have him as like a 13th, 14th round type guy. But if you want to take him up a little bit higher, that's no shame in that game.
Yeah, I feel like ideally Gronk would be a guy that would be like keep on the bench, put him in good matchups. I don't think I'd want him as a starting tight end, but again, then the tight ends, it's just so hard to come by a good one in fantasy football.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's move on to number 8. You have Robert Tanyan out of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, somebody who has all the tools to be a really, really good tight end, and he has the MVP as his quarterback. So I had to put him here. I think there are going to be some games during the season when you play him and you're hurt by his production, but there are also going to be some games when Aaron's really liking him and wants to keep getting him the ball, and he might have 2 touchdowns. So I think all that averages out. You got to think Devonta Adams is there too, one of the best receivers, if not the best in the league. So, targets are might be a little difficult to come by for a tight end in that offense, but Aaron has publicly talked about liking this guy, so I wanted to make sure he was in my top 10.
Yeah, I actually have him as my ninth best tight end on the board. He's Big Bob, man, Big Bob Tanyan. Aaron Rodgers can definitely get him the ball, but there's so many weapons on that offense. You just never know who's going to get the bulk of the touches. But last year, he put up some huge games. So he's right now trending in the 8th round. I have him more of a 10th, 11th round type guy. But he would definitely produce for you. Like you said, when it comes to tight ends, it's very slim pickings. But he is a guy who will get you some points. He's not going to get you the Travis Kelce or the George Kittle type of points. But if you're in the later rounds, definitely consider Tanyan because he will get you some points there.
Absolutely.
All right, your number 9 tight end on the board.
My number 9 is going to be Logan Thomas coming out of Washington. And the reason I have him here is because it's not that I think, he's better than who I have below him, but I think, we saw Greg Olson work in the offense that they're running in Washington. And Greg Olson was one of the best in the league. And they've talked about really, really liking Logan Thomas and liking the development that he's had. And we kind of saw it through last year. Logan Thomas started the year slow, but toward the end of the year, he was somebody that was at least on waiver wire radars for people and somebody that you could slide in as somebody that's not going to kill you any given week. So, with a crafty quarterback coming in like Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Logan Thomas to have some games and help people win some weeks. But you're going to have to want to watch. I think there will be some weeks where he's kind of down, but should have the good weeks too.
Yeah, I can't really add much to what you said. I will say he's trending in the 6th round. I have him more of an 8th, 9th round type of guy, but that's just my personal opinion. But I like where you have him on the board as the 9th best.
Yeah, seems appropriate.
Yeah, he's right around that area. Your number 10, Dallas Goedert.
Yep, Dallas Goedert coming out of the Eagles.
I just like to say Go Dirt Tay.
I see what you did there. It's still up in the air what's going to happen with Zach Ertz. Even just as much as a week ago, they were talking about, Bill Belichick's going to go get Zach Ertz from the Eagles. I don't know how much he's going to play. I don't know if he's about to get traded before the season starts. If he plays, will that hurt Dallas Goedert's value? I don't know what's happening with Zach Ertz. So I wanted to put Dallas Goedert higher. I think he could be valued higher, but because of the uncertainties there, I just wasn't sure what to do.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said earlier when we were talking about Carson Wentz, this Philadelphia Eagles team is just not very good at all. I don't know how I feel about Jalen Hurts being the starting quarterback or what he can do, how that's going to impact Goddard. I have him right above Tanyan. I think what I say as my number – Goddard will be my number 9, I believe. But he's trending in the 7th right now. I have him more as a 9th, 10th round type guy. But like we said with the tight ends, it's very slim picking. So he's one of the guys that if he's there and you need a tight end, it's time to draft a tight end. He's one of the guys you need to be looking at.
Absolutely, yep.
All right, so that wraps up our running backs, receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends. Let's hit some sleepers real quick before we get out of here. Who is your biggest sleepers in the draft?
So some of the guys that I'm really going to be looking out for this year, we talked a lot about him last year. A guy like Zach Moss, I think Devin Singletary really, I mean, messed his opportunity up last year. He had the lead back role with Zach Moss on his heels, and Devin Singletary didn't get it done. So I think Zach Moss is a guy that could have a big time year in that offense, especially with the passing threat that happens in the Buffalo offense. I think Zach Moss could be huge. I also think Travis Etienne is the best running back coming out of the 2021 draft.
Hold on? Let me stop you. Do you think Etienne's going to start, or do you think it'll be James Robinson?
From what I've heard, I believe Travis Etienne is both going to start and see a bulk of the snaps. How that happens after what James Robinson did last year, I have no idea. I think he at least deserves a 50-50 split until Etienne separates himself. But, Etienne, because of what I'm hearing, I have Etienne as a guy that is sleeper value, somebody that I think has a chance to, as the year goes on, maybe you draft him a little later, but I think, the last half of the season, he's going to have a huge impact, especially working with his quarterback from college. The chemistry's there. I think he's going to be able to do everything. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He has a pretty good offensive line. They're not stellar, but they're not terrible either. So I like his offensive line and think he can be effective.
Okay, yeah, I asked because James Robinson did so much last year, especially fantasy wise. He was an absolute sleeper last year, put up huge numbers. I was really hoping that Robinson would be out there this year because I think if you can get Robinson in later rounds, that'd be a huge win. So I don't know which route they're going to go, if they're going to use both of them, if they're going to start ETN or not. So either one of those guys, if one of them is getting the bulk of the carries, I would definitely consider grabbing them maybe as a flex. I don't know if I would have them as an every week starter, but one or the other, I think they will bring you good value if you can get them in the later rounds.
Yeah, and I could see one or the other. Again, I think it'll be Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne is somebody that I would at least think about putting as my flex every week. I think he has that kind of value.
Yeah, absolutely. Who else do you have as a sleeper?
So I have quite a few wide receivers here. I'll name them off and see what you think about them. I think Marvin Jones going down to Jacksonville, I think there's some value to be had there. There's always value with Marvin Jones. He's a big play guy. Sammy Watkins with the Ravens, obviously, he should be taking that lead role, at least until Rashad Bateman is able to get some experience and come into his own. He might take that role, but right now it seems like Sammy Watkins in Baltimore should have a pretty good year. And this one I hope so bad that he can stay healthy. Paris Campbell is somebody that, if he stays healthy, could be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. And the only reason, I kind of mentioned it earlier, that I didn't put a guy like Paris Campbell in my top 10 is because the Colts throw it to like 10 different people every game. So it's hard to really tell who's going to get the targets, how many yards, and who's going to get the touchdowns. Zach Pascal, I don't actually have him on this list, but is a guy that, at least in training camp and in the preseason games, gets a lot of targets in the red zone. And if you go back and look at last year, Zach Pascal gets targets in the red zone. So whether it's Paris Campbell or Zach Pascal, there's somebody there in that offense that I think could be valuable in the later rounds of the draft. And then to finish, one more Colt. I put one more Colt here. He's a super sleeper. This is a super sleeper. Mike Strawn. I wanted to put him here just to put him on people's radars. This is a guy, he's taking reps with the first team in practice. He's played, I am almost certain he's played the entire game, both preseason games. They really want this guy to get experience in the offense, and he's looked good. He's a big body guy. I've heard people calling him Megatron. So, that's a lot to live up to when you're starting to, compare a little bit to Megatron. But I just wanted to put him on people's radars. Maybe not right away he'll have fantasy value, but as the season goes on, I think he'll be a factor. And then the last receiver I have here is going to be Allen Lazard, because the Lizard King has shown when he's in the lineup. He's a big body. Aaron Rodgers likes to go to him, and I think he can be effective.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on pretty much all of those. I like Marvin Jones. I had him for a little bit last year. He didn't really do too much for me, but he's now down in Jacksonville. Just depends on how well that offense is rolling and how well Trevor Lawrence is going to do, especially being a rookie. I mean, no matter how good you are, rookies are going to struggle at times. So Marvin Jones can produce. He may be a flex type of guy, depending on the matchup for the week. Same thing with Sammy Watkins. I definitely think he'll get his. And Paris Campbell, we're expecting him to be a very good receiver for the Indianapolis Colts if he can just stay healthy. Alan Lazard, he has Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball, but I definitely want to hit on Mike Strawn. I know a lot of people, everybody, pretty much everybody listening, unless you're a Colts fan, probably never heard of this guy, but he has been absolutely almost dominating in these preseason games. And yes, they're the preseason. You're playing second, third, fourth stringers, but this guy has a potential to come out as the number one receiver in the next couple of years for the Indianapolis Colts. So nobody's going to be drafting him. If he's there and you need a receiver, depending on the matchup, there's a possibility he may have a breakout game for you. It'll be a little bit risky, but there is a possibility he will be a super sleeper like Jeffe alluded to.
Yeah, especially in the deeper leagues, like 10-team leagues, you might not have Mike Strong getting drafted. He might be a waiver guy later in the year. But in the deeper leagues, when you're talking about 12, 14, and 16 team leagues, I think Mike Strong is somebody that should absolutely be somebody's stowaway.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I see you have a couple quarterback sleepers here. You want to go ahead and talk about them?
Yeah, so the first one here is going to be Trey Lance, because I think Trey Lance is going to steal Jimmy Garoppolo's job. It's just a matter of time. We've seen Trey Lance his first game. He was 5 for 12. He had a lot of yards, but a lot of that was one play. But he came out in his second preseason game and looked good. And this is a guy that I talked about when we were doing our draft episode. I think he's going to be a star in this league. He has all the tools you'll want. He's bigger than people give him credit for. He's more mobile than I think people give him credit for, and he can sling the ball. So I really like Trey Lance. Again, maybe not playing right away. I'm pretty sure they want Jimmy G starting the season, especially because he's making like $27 million a year. They probably want him starting the season, but I mean, kind of like the Rome. I mean, Jimmy G could very well get hurt. I was going to say kind of like what happened with Romo and Dak. Jimmy G has an injury history. I could easily see him getting hurt and going out for a game or two, and Trey Lance shows his star ability. But again, Trey Lance, I believe, will end up being the starter at some point. So somebody that in a deeper league, maybe you draft him, stow him away for a little while. But if you're not drafting him and nobody drafts him, keep him on the waiver wire list in case something happens to Jimmy G. And also, I have Daniel Jones here because the supporting cast around him got so much better in the offseason. I think that this is the year. Like, the offensive line isn't great, so there's a little hesitation on saying this is the year. But he has all the weapons you could ask for. And when you insert Saquon Barkley back into the occasion, teams have to fear the run, and then you have to worry about Daniel Jones and his rushing ability. I think that's somebody that people make fun of all the time, and people say he's not the guy, and they have since he got drafted. But I like Daniel Jones. I've liked Daniel Jones since he was coming out of college, and he's somebody that, again, because of the pieces around him, should have a pretty good season.
Yeah, you made pretty good points for both of those guys. I like Trey Lance's ability, especially pairing him with Kyle Shanahan and his genius of an offensive mind. I definitely think he's going to take Jimmy G's starting position. That is bound to happen. Obviously, you trade all these assets to move up to number 3. It's just a matter of when. So I don't know if I would definitely use a draft pick on Trey Lance, but if you're able to snag him up at some point, maybe it's in the later rounds or even in free agency, put him on the back burner. When his time comes, he's definitely going to produce. And I do agree with you on Daniel Jones. They have intentionally and dramatically changed this offense and added pieces because time is running out for the New York Giants. So they are doing everything they can to give him the pieces on Daniel Jones, see what they have in him. I think he'll do well. I know a lot of people make fun of Daniel Jones, but I think he'll do well this year.
Yeah, and I mean, if Daniel Jones doesn't do well this year, then he's just not going to do well. That's basically what that comes down to.
Yeah, it's essentially a make or break year for him.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so you have one tight end sleeper on here, like we said earlier, Slim Pickens on the tight end, but this is one guy that most people are putting off on the back burner here. But you think he's going to do well?
Yeah, somebody that I think should at least be on people's radar. It's obviously it's uncertain what's going to happen. He's getting older, but Jared Cook has shown in the past he has explosive ability. He's been multiple places and he's produced in multiple places. And because the Chargers won't go and draft another receiver or bring in another receiver to pair with Keenan Allen, I think Jared Cook is going to be that guy. And I think he's going to get a decent amount of targets. Obviously, Justin Herbert can sling that thing. So that's not anything to worry about. And you have to imagine Justin Herbert's going to love throwing the ball to a big-bodied tight end, somebody that's been in the league for a while and somebody that he can lean on and rely on when they really need a first down. So Jared Cook just feels like somebody I almost put him on my top 10 list and thought about taking Gronk off of there. There was some debate in my head about that one. But Jared Cook should for sure be on people's radar, at least as a sleeper pick.
Yeah, very interesting take. We'll see. I was high on Jared Cook the last couple of seasons, and he served me well at times. So time will definitely tell there. But that's all we have for you guys today. We appreciate you sticking it out. I know this was long, but we hope that we can give you some valuable analysis, some valuable insight for your fantasy draft. We hope you can kick some ass, take some names, win some money if you're playing for money. But yeah, we appreciate you hanging out with us today. So, Jeffe, you got anything else fantasy-wise you want to talk about?
Nah, man. I think we pretty much covered it. We got what 2 hours into this thing. We've covered quite a bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that wraps up Fantasy Central. We will be back next week with Brad on the Horsemen Pro Football Talk doing our playoff predictions. So we look forward to seeing you then and hope you have a good week.